Thanks for tuning in to the HR Uprising podcast. I'm your host, Lucinda. The HR Uprising is focused on helping forward-thinking people professionals deliver real lasting value in their organisations. I'm a chartered psychologist, speaker and trainer, and recently authored the best-selling business book, How to Be a Change Superhero. My day job is founder and CEO of software and training business Actus. This gives me the opportunity to work with other businesses like yours. We are focused on building a better workplace for people wherever they are located, with the help of our performance, learning and talent management software and our training and consultancy services. Every week on the podcast, I will be covering different topics and challenges, joined by relevant experts and real-life people professionals. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope you enjoy and get value from this week's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's HR Uprising podcast. I'm your host, Lucinda, you know that, and we are now moving into our 8th episode in our high performance series. So this topic is recruiting and onboarding talent, and it's a big one. But it's such an important one because ultimately attracting and retaining the right people is so much more than a tick box HR task, isn't it? It's a strategic business priority. This is a way in which we in HR can add huge value to the business, but quite often the responsibility maybe disproportionately sits with us. So we also need to be enabling managers to help in this, to make sure that they know what the role needs to be. I mean, how many times have you been in situations where people have maybe started a recruitment process, then changed their mind partway down the track, wasting everybody's time, and you just don't want to do that. So in this episode, we'll talk about how we can define a role effectively, what best practice recruitment looks like, how we can interview and select candidates with real purpose, and also how to onboard them. So the whole piece that takes us right from finding the right people, attracting them to the organisation, and then, as we've covered in other topics, how we enable them to be high performers within the organisation. Now, I know there's recruitment experts out there, so, write in, join in the LinkedIn chat. I'm sure there's lots of people who've got other expertise they can bring to this, because this is something that I've personally, I was more of a generalist in terms of an L&D generalist and organisational development and change specialist. And I think one of these things is that I know there are some real experts with recruiting. Having said that, in my role as a line manager, as a business owner, I have had to do lots on this topic, both as a guiding people in terms of it and also learning in terms of bringing the right people on board. So I've experienced it too. And actually, this first section, when we're talking about defining the role and starting with clarity, for me, this actually does fit quite clearly into an organisational development piece. It's about having purpose, understanding what it is that we really need to achieve. And it's not about dusting off an old job description. We need to, if there's a new role coming in, even if it's just 18 months since the last one, in these really fast changing times, it's worth asking, and this might be you asking if you're recruiting or you asking that hiring manager, what has changed since the last time this role was filled? What do you think we really need now and in the future? And are there skills we're missing in the team that this hire could bring in? It may also be worth saying, what did the previous incumbent bring to this role that you want to keep, and what maybe was missing that you want to look for? So thinking about things there. So we're talking about obviously the basic skills in terms of doing the job, but there may also be individual skills that someone can bring to the team which would help them fit in culturally. It's definitely worth collaborating with your key stakeholders here, because the clearer you are on what good looks like, the better chance we've got of attracting the right people. So do think of more than just tasks. Think about skills, behaviours, values alignment, and even future potential. Someone doesn't have to come in being fully formed, but have they got the future potential to take you where you want to go? And this also is where we should think about our employee value proposition if we haven't done previously, because actually attracting people, the right people, it's a two-way sales job. So what is it that makes your organisation, your team, you as a line manager, your role attractive? And it might be, we don't always have the most attractive salary, but it might be our culture, it might be the flexibility, development. It's about the whole picture is what someone likes. So it might be that people don't have to go into London every day of the week, that they only have to go in 2 or 3 days a week, or it might be that you've got a wonderful office with lovely refreshments, or it might be that you've got a really tight team, cohesive team structure where people collaborate and have various activities together. Whatever it might be that makes a unique proposition for this candidate, because someone who is attracted to what you genuinely offer is more likely to be a good fit. So we've got clarity on what the role is and what we think a good fit would be. Now what we need to do is attract that talent to this role. So it's got to be more than transactional. We really need to think about building a relationship with them. And I'd say it is, as I said earlier, like a sales activity, it's a recruitment, it's a marketing activity, almost more than an HR process. So be aware from an HR point of view that job seekers today are savvy. They're not just looking at our job description, they'll be checking out the Glassdoor reviews, LinkedIn presence, maybe company values, definitely the company website. And you need to make sure the recruitment process is transparent, efficient, and really importantly, human. So I realise that sometimes we go out for jobs, I've experienced it myself, and you have literally hundreds of applicants, many of which are actually wildly unsuitable. But making sure that when you're using something in terms of your recruitment platform, your applicant tracking platform, that people do get notified, and where possible, certainly at the early stage, they get notified as to whether they've been taken forwards or not. You might have exclusion questions so that it's really clear. And think about later on in the stage, making sure that people genuinely get treated like people, right? They've invested, they've thought they might book a job, they've got an interview. Do they get feedback? Are they treated fairly? Is the communication fluid and flowing? Do you get back to them when you say you're going to get back to them? It's so important. Just really, I think, from an ethical point of view, of course, it will reflect on employer brand. And there's lots of stuff in terms of the reviews, but that is not always within your power. So sometimes someone's going to be rejected for legitimate reasons and they'll still give a negative review. But I just think it's about thinking about the ethos. Treat people like you would want to be treated, and maybe audit your own recruitment process. Try it out. What's the experience? What is the candidate experience applying for a job with your business? Does it get a kind of computer says no approach? Or, would you want to go through that process? Or is it actually quite nicely communicating and you feel that it's been well managed? So just be aware, if this is something that sits within your role, then think about what is that candidate experience. Don't be, it's all very well when we set it up from the recruiter end, it's worth testing it out from the other end. And remember that modern recruitment is multi-channel, right? The careers board, specialist job boards, LinkedIn. Wow, we put a roll out on LinkedIn recently and we had to close it within an hour because so many people coming into it. Employee referrals, one of our most successful hires has been through an employee referral. And of course, don't forget internal hires. I remember, a number of years ago, the business I used to work for, people would say, well, it's well known that you have to leave the business and come back to get a pay rise. Well, that's a bit silly, isn't it? Come on, think of all the cost of that. Think of the pain of that. You lose that talent. Are we giving people within the business the opportunity to be recruited in? And of course, make sure through that candidate experience, you are being inclusive. Check for language or biased language in your job adverts. Make sure that criteria you're asking for are genuinely essential. And that's where I think you have got to be a little bit careful about culture fit, because you should never recruit somebody for a personality metric, right? Just because you think, oh, they'll fit in the team. It's more that might be an additional bonus, understanding how someone might fit in from a personality point of view. It's very much about making sure that you are looking for the right key skills, but also making it attractive to those people who have the right values into the organisation. So part 3, we're shortlisting and structuring the process. So we've got these applications in. How do we trim it down while still being human? And this is where it can be really quite tricky, and having the right system is important. But again, I just underline that previous point that we made, which is make sure that the communication around it is real, is personal. Again, it is very interesting because when it's just a massive numbers game, it's quite hard, having worked with people who are on the other end of it. So both my kids were sort of at the job hunting job, and they go through the big platforms who, you can send off hundreds and hundreds of applications and get nowhere, because it's almost searching for negatives. It's almost searching for reasons to reject. So it can be a real temptation to just skim through, and that is, you've got to be really careful about this in terms of bias. Having said that, with the volume, it's really, really tricky. So just think about what's fair in terms of your recruitment. Set up on your applicant tracking, a yes no questions almost, so people can self-select out if there's something, if they need a car for the job, for example, or a minimum of 2 years experience in a relevant role. But then on the other hand, be open-minded. If it is something where you could give a grad or a school leaver a genuine opportunity, don't restrict it because of experience things. Think about what could they offer that would give them an opportunity. One organisation I've seen, I said, in fact, I'll share, my daughter's recently got a graduate job. Now, what was interesting about that is that the organisation she applied to, they said, we believe everybody deserves an opportunity to go through an interview process, but they made it a digital interview process. And so therefore they had 5 questions that came up. You had to write an answer and you had to video that answer. Now, I don't know whether human beings assessed it or whether that was done automatically. I don't know. But what I do know is that it made it feel more personal, like they were able to bring their personality to the role, and that they'd had almost like a fairer chance. And then the next step, it went on to other video. It used technology well, is what I would describe. Now, that was for a sales role, so I think that's particularly relevant in that. But there's no reason why, if you're looking for an admin role, are other ways in which we could use technology to give people a fair chance where they're using their initiative as opposed to their CV. So if they try hard, if they stand out, that they can actually get a foot in the door, as opposed to it's, oh, they haven't got that experience or otherwise. So that's just one of the things I was thinking, that technology can help us maybe open up the opportunities, those people who've got a bit of nous, a bit of get up and go. And let's face it, particularly in these virtual working times, those are the people you want to employ. Those are the skills you want to encourage. You want people who come in who really want the job and go the extra mile. And just because they've got a great CV, or maybe we're going on to interviews next, they carry out a great interview, are there other ways in which you can assess their capabilities? So we've talked about the thinking about what assessments, what your interview process could look like, and are the ways in which there are different stages. You can give people maximum opportunity, try and avoid bias. Can you put in assessments or tasks that could demonstrate real skills and make it a fairer board for people to get assessed by? Then, of course, let's go to interviews. Well, of course, this is where we can, in theory, really dig into potential. But do remember that actual interviews on their own are not a great indicator of performance. What they say is you really do need more of an assessment centre or process, which is why you should have key activities, not just interviews, because undoubtedly there are some people who are just great at performing an interview, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be great in the job. But make sure that if you are going to interview, of course, you're going to interview to some level, it's very clear that you should use a structured interview. So again, structured interviewing compared to unstructured, are you just asking a few questions for, whatever you fancy? That is not going to give you a fair, unbiased approach. You've got to have a standard set of questions to be structured with it, the same core questions to ensure fairness. Now, of course, you can follow up questions, make sure you're digging in to get a real understanding. I always I remember years ago, and I know many people still use it, the STAR model: situation, task, action, result. So I remember being told by the interviewer to answer the question in that way. So actually to say, what was the situation I was in? What was the task that I did? What action did I personally do? Which of course makes it much clearer as to whether somebody is talking about a team project or something that someone else did, or whether it's personal to them, and what was the result. So giving your interviewee maximum chance to demonstrate their capabilities in a structured way is a good thing. And then, of course, you've got competency-based interviewing. And incidentally, interviews and being interviewed, we've got great podcast episodes on those. Joe Irwin has been on 3 times on the podcast. They are our most downloaded episodes. So if you want to know more about interviewing, drill into those, either to interview or to be interviewed. They're great episodes. So think about competency-based questions, behavioural or situational, where you might say, tell me about a time when you had to deal with conflicting priorities. How did you approach it? So those are questions that you can ask in the moment. Now, those are the sort of questions, equally, if you're doing pre-screening, you could ask those on a pre-screening. Add in practical tasks or case studies. So this is where you take it from being just interview, but into something you're actually testing out skills and people's thinking. So you might ask them to bring a presentation on something, or if they're coming into a technology role, give them a technology challenge and ask how they approach it. And then, depending on where you are in the stage of it, involve certain members of the team, get other opinions, whether they interview separately and you divide it up, or have a small virtual chat. So don't just make a decision on your own, make sure you're rounding that decision with the help of others. Of course, the main thing is really help that candidate to show what they're capable of, to bring their true authentic self. So make sure you don't overtalk them, but don't forget that there is a level of selling the business as well. So part of it should be telling them what the business has to offer, because if you decide you want them to still want you as well. So remember, it is still a two-way process. So we've thought about interviewing now. So we've gone through, we're almost at that stage. We've started with thinking about what we want. We started about how we can attract the talent. We've looked at shortlisting and interviewing. How do we then select the right person? Well, it's a great idea if you've been using structured questions to have a scoring matrix or actually come up with scores. And that's where it's useful to have other people as part of your interview process. So you can give your own rating and then compare it with others. So again, if you've ever been an assessor in an assessment centre, then that's what you would do. You would make your rating based on the criteria that you're looking for. So standardised criteria or competencies that you've predefined, which obviously relate to what it is you're looking for. But then you might score what's the, how does that person, or how did that interview or that question, how did they come over within that? And then compare. So you can use that scoring matrix to see, who the strongest candidates are and get to a short list. And then talk to people about who do you feel had the right mix of capability and growth, would complement the team, not just replicate. Be aware of things like the halo and horns effect, where suddenly you might hear something that sounds really great about them, think, oh, that fits, that would be great. They've got experience in project management in a certain area that you want there. And suddenly you look at everything else they say with rose tinted glasses. Equally, there might be something early on that someone says you kind of don't warm to, and you can look at everything with negative glasses. So make sure that you're being objective and test it out. Sometimes the best person won't be the most polished, the perfect person for the role. It might be the person who can grow into the role, that's got the most passion, fresh perspective, complements the team. So it isn't straightforward in terms of, always the strongest. It's what's going to be the right fit overall for your business. And that's where you really got to take a step back and think about it. Now, that stage we've talked about in terms of that interviewing stage, we've probably, certainly in our business, we probably have at least two, maybe even three stages of interviews. The first one would be a pre-screening type approach, quick get to know you. And second one, or third, depending on how you do it, would be meet the team, but would have multiple phases to it, including activities. What is really key is, because sometimes you'd be seeing people on different days, is being really open and honest about when you're going to get back to people, and then get back to them when you say you will. So, we're interviewing all week, and we'll be talking about this, and so we will come back to you with a decision one way or another by next Wednesday or whatever. And if for some reason it drags on, still go back to them by that next Wednesday and say, we'll still be coming back to you by next Friday. Keep them informed, and particularly these people who you've ended up speaking to personally, make sure that there is some sort of follow-up, some sort of communication about things. And if they ask for feedback, provide them with some feedback. And that's where you don't have to go into sort of failings, but can you give them something constructive that they could work on? Or it might be that a specific candidate had a specific experience that brought them through. So that's where your scoring matrix is really useful, because you might be able to say, actually, on the project, on the presentation, you performed particularly highly, but in the team exercise was somebody else who actually seemed to link, who came over more strongly, and on balance that balanced out. It was a very close run. So you want to be able to make sure that there's something positive that person can take from it. Now, let's say you've sent out the offer letter, they've accepted. Where do you go from here? Well, don't go radio silent again in this day and age. It really is important to keep warm before day one. This didn't really exist years ago, but I think it's really important now. I have heard a number of examples where radio silence from the organisation can create doubt, even though that person has signed their contract. I've heard people who have accepted it and then ended up not showing up on day one, maybe because someone else came and poached them in between, particularly if it's been a little bit of a lag or their existing companies has increased their offer. So you do need to keep people engaged, excited, and connected. And I would say you need to be telling them what they're going to expect from their first week. You would send out some information. Now, understandably, you're not going to send out a computer too early, but if you're not, you say your computer will arrive on that first day, you might send them, if you can, give them little videos about things, a welcome pack. The line manager or buddy could just check in, drop them an email, ask them how they're getting together, but basically keep them warm. And let's say it's 6 to 8 weeks before they join from when you accepted, you should be sending it once the contract's signed. Send them something every week to 10 days, however little. Just say, oh, look, yeah, checking in, any questions, you're looking forward to it, however subtle it might be. Now, I reckon the line manager should be taking this on, to be honest, by this point, certainly within the final month. But maybe you should set that up in your organization, because that makes a big difference to how excited somebody is on joining. And also, it's not about being overly elaborate. It's just being thoughtful. And when they do arrive, in terms of the onboarding piece, think about things like, do you know about them? Have you got any personal information about them? What's their favorite color? Or do they support a football team? Those sort of things. So I've seen really nice examples in some businesses where they have a personalized welcome with a, in your football team's colors or whatever it might be. Or, if you've got branded material, send out some branded material to people. And yeah, I send it out earlier than the weekend before they start on the Monday. Everyone starts asking questions. What's going to happen? Where do I need to be? Am I going to be in an office? A couple of weeks before, really people do need to have clarity about what that first week's going to look like. So don't leave it to the last minute. If you're having to hand it over to the hiring manager, make sure they know what's expected of them and have a process that follows up to check that they have actually provided that and they are keeping their candidate warm. Because you've done all the hard work, you've invested time, and there might have been a runner-up candidate that you turned down because this one was better. Then by letting them go cold between the offer and the contract and them joining, and you might say, oh, they signed the contract, doesn't matter. People, you can't really hold people to a contract if they don't show up. So it's important, that pre-boarding. It's really often overlooked. Nearly there. So now we're on to onboarding. So this is, let's say it's day one, and it's not just about paperwork and compliance. Now, I've done a webinar and I've done a topic on this where I talk about the 5 different types of onboarding, and some of it does link to pre-boarding. But really, what we're saying is it needs to have a structure to it, but it shouldn't be too generic. There's always some generic stuff that you've got to do. Yes, the mandatory compliance stuff. Yes, making sure that people understand rules and policies and things like that. But then also needs to be personalized. So helping them understand what their role is, and also linking to people. This is so important. So even in a virtual world, can you get some face-to-face stuff going on? Give them a buddy, welcome lunches, take them out for lunch, informal meetups, give that human connection. And that onboarding needs to take up, someone is onboarding really for the first 3 months. Great if they hit the ground running and are performing within that time. But it should be iterative, helping them to grow within that role and get to maximum performance, not just minimum, what the jargon and the lingo is. It's going to go on for a while, and it needs to build incrementally. Be careful. There are some pitfalls in these that you've got to be careful about, which is where people can feel really overwhelmed in that first. And there's so much information, and there's also a lot of very sort of passive information where you're just having to absorb stuff. Loads of jargon. Be aware that you'll have plenty of 3-letter acronyms in your organization that may mean nothing to a new starter. So trying to communicate those things. So you've got, those are the sort of essential bits of onboarding, which is the compliance and policies, making sure people have got the kit and the tech and they're set up and they've got teams, etc., etc. You've got the social bit to make sure that people, have that social connection, get that sense of belonging as soon as possible. And then setting expectations is really key as well, helping people understand what good looks like, how can they succeed, giving them clear objectives. Now, you're not going to set them a 12-month objective in week 1, but you could set them a 6-week objective. So give them things to aim for so that they can really feel that sense of achievement. So you give them almost a performance level of onboarding too, and record those. If you have a system like Actus, record those as short-term objectives so they have that sense of completing it. So onboarding, really crucial. So finally, just sort of wrapping it up, what should you do in this topic to avoid, common pitfalls to avoid? Well, make sure you do structure your interviews and validate them objectively. Don't just go on gut instinct. You will regret the number of times you have a gut instinct hire and you regret it. Be careful about that classic hiring someone in your own image or in the opposite or same image of someone else. It might limit diversity and they may have the same blind spots. Really think about that candidate experience from the start. They were saying, you never know who's going to be your next boss, do you? And try not to overload new starters with admin on day one. Don't send an offer out and then forget about them for 2 months. Make sure you keep them warm, keep them excited, and make sure that onboarding is broad in terms of the social aspects and the belonging as much as the sort of tangible learning things that you have to. Ultimately, you have invested personally and as a business time and effort to hire this person. So you want to make sure that investment pays off. And that is all about helping those people not just to come on board, and it's helping them to perform on board because that's why you recruited them. So it's more than knowledge transfer. It's about helping them set goals. It's about helping them grow. It's about introducing them to the right people and, implementing your performance management process in a helpful goal setting way so they have clarity about what's expected. And then of course you should move into your regular performance management approach of giving feedback about how well they're doing and what they can do even better. So just a few practical takeaways to wrap up with. Maybe have a look at job descriptions. Are they fit for purpose? Are you moving to role profiles, or are you ditching them altogether? So think about how you're starting recruitment. Are they still relevant? Audit your recruitment process. What is it like? What do you think the candidate journey is like? Maybe talk to a few people who are recent hires and ask them what aspects of the candidate journey could have been improved. Make sure that your hiring managers are following the same criteria. So it depends on your organisation whether you're hand-holding them for hiring or whether they're off doing it. And if they're off doing it, make sure you've got interview guides, selection frameworks, processes. Make sure they are following the right process as well. Emphasize pre-boarding and onboarding, and the ownership for that really should sit with the hiring manager. So ensure that they're doing that and they know what to expect. So hopefully that's given you a few elements, a little bit of food for thought that builds on previous episodes that we've done. It's not recruiting and onboarding talent is not about process. Well, it's not just about process. There is some process to it. It's really though about that experience, the candidate experience. And you want to, it's a sales process. You want to market to people, attract the right people, and you want them to say yes. And then give them every reason to stay and to want to perform. So recruitment and onboarding is not just an admin task. It is the first impression of your business. If you want them to thrive, you've got to set them up for success. And that means your process has got to be intentional, inclusive, and inspiring. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I hope it sparked some ideas, or if I've missed some huge chunks out, do connect with me on LinkedIn, chat on the LinkedIn group, or drop me a message. Next time is our penultimate episode in this 10-part high performance HR series. Can you believe that? And so we're moving on to talent development and retention. So I really hope you found this episode helpful. Please do share it with others. Give us a review if you are enjoying this series. We've been going for 6 years, so I do question whether I should carry on doing this or not. But if you find it useful or helpful, then that kind of feedback would be really very much appreciated. Thanks again. See you soon.
I really hope you found this week's episode useful and enjoyable. If you did, perhaps you could recommend us to a friend or colleague, or give us a review on your platform of choice. It really helps new listeners to find us. Now you can access links to any of the information mentioned in this show via the website www.hruprising.com. Further free resources are also available at www.actus.co.uk. There you can also find out more about our software and training solutions. Finally, why not join our LinkedIn group, the HR Uprising, to share ideas and collaborate with other like-minded people professionals. Thank you for listening to the HR Uprising podcast.
This episode was brought to you by Disruptive Media, helping bold entrepreneurs stand out through podcasting, video, and social content. Visit disruptivemedia.co.uk to learn more.